The National Guard is coming to Memphis, and y'all, I think it's time we actually talk about what I think it means for not just Memphis, but America as a whole. According to the White House, this is about restoring law and order. But the real question is understanding whether or not law and order needed to be established in Memphis in the first place, or if this is more of a strategic play. So just last week, Tennessee's Governor Bill Lee admitted that there had been months of talks with the current administration about bringing the Guard in. But earlier this year, that same governor said Memphis didn't need federal involvement. So the true question is, which one is it? Now let's actually look at the numbers in Memphis, which has been a big call for conversation within Memphis and in general. So Memphis crime data does show segments of crime being lower this year than previous years. In fact, property crime is at a 25-year low, violent crime is at a 12-year low, and homicides are at a 6-year low. So if crime is trending down in these categories, why is Memphis being painted like a city that's completely out of control and needs law and order to be reestablished? And again, if our governor said, well, we do not need the National Guard in Memphis previously, but is now saying that we do, where's the disconnect? Memphis Mayor Paul Young said that he didn't even know that the Guard was coming until he saw the same press conference that you and I saw of it being announced. That means that these conversations were happening between the governor and the president and didn't include the mayor. I just think that's interesting because technically with a federal order like this, it's never just about the National Guard coming in. It also comes packaged with ICE and other government agencies. And suddenly what was supposed to be about violent crime ends up being more about immigration enforcement and sweeping up unhoused people underneath vague vagrancy laws. Speaking of vagrancy, vagrancy is actually a word that does not mean much. It's actually really vague, and it's interesting that vagrancy is one of the crimes that are being punished underneath this federal order. In practice, it means that homelessness has the potential to be criminalized. And that's what we saw in DC, where federal forces came in and we saw them removing homeless people from the streets. So with this in mind and the Memphis Safe Task Force initiative being more about jailing people for things like trespassing, graffiti, loitering, and being unhoused, it begs a larger question. So as somebody from Shelby County, I understand that the Shelby County jails themselves have been facing an issue. Right now, Shelby County's jail holds more than 2,900 inmates in facilities that are built for around 2,700. And there's also reports of about 300 beds being unusable. So city leaders have stated issues with not necessarily understanding where the funding was coming in to house these people because we just do not have the facilities. And it's not that we don't want criminals to be locked up. When you are sweeping up low-level arrests, it looks like having a huge amount of people in jails that are already overcrowded. And another thing is, this really reminds me of Project 2025. So if you remember, back when Trump was still running, he distanced himself from that initiative and he wanted people to believe that he had no plans to shrink democracy under this document, which was designed to give one party indefinite control. But if you look back at what has happened since his administration has been in office, we've seen a lot of progress underneath this strategic blueprint. See, Project 2025 is really about centralizing power at the federal level. And we understand that America is a democratic society. So centralizing power at the federal level means you give the executive branch more control and more reach. And in studying history, I personally have learned how democracies collapse. And they don't collapse overnight. It takes time. They erode little by little. And people get used to temporary measures and they eventually start to feel more permanent until they are. And then you're numb to how things are happening and it's just this is how things have always been. So first it was DC, now it's Memphis. And if people get used to seeing the National Guard and ICE in their neighborhoods for absolutely no logical reason, it stops feeling like an emergency and it starts to feel normal. So in my opinion, it's not about solving Memphis crime per se. This is more about shaping a narrative of how America needs to be put in order, how these different cities need to be handled, and only the federal government can come in and make things right. And I think it's interesting when you come into places where the mayor is not specifically stating that there is a state of emergency, and instead the governor in this case and the president are conspiring behind closed doors to plan out some strategic initiative to take over the country. So painting Memphis as out of control, sending in federal forces, and making people believe that federal power belongs in everyday city life, tie it to immigration, tie it to homelessness, and tie it to low-level crimes that pad the arrest numbers but don't address the real issues. Meanwhile, our jails are stretched past capacity and our leaders are cut out of the conversation. That's why this moment matters, because Memphis is being used as a template, and if it works here, you can bet it'll show up somewhere else. So let me know your thoughts in the comment. Am I right or am I wrong?